Hi everybody, welcome to today's chapter. We are reading the book A Diary of Dreams. It's the first book in the Universal series and we're on chapter 5, Around the Stew Pot. Ali and Hugh arrived back at the motorhome where Bill and Helen were inside setting up the last few things. Hugh rushed in. "We're back!" Bill stopped what he was doing and sat down. "So what did you see?" he asked. Hugh began an account of what they had watched at the team roping competitions, practicing with and buying the rope, and meeting John, Sally and Aidan. Ali turned to Helen. "I hope you don't mind, but I have invited a couple more people to dinner." "The more the merrier," Helen said, pulling out the stew pot. Ali made her way over to the pickup and began unpacking the vegetables that she had brought from the supermarket, putting them on the table outside. Helen appeared with the chopping board, knife and peeler. "What's first?" she asked. "Nothing. You relax. You're having a night off from cooking," Ali said, smiling. "I could get used to this," Helen said, sitting on a chair opposite Ali. "So, how was it?" Helen asked. "Incredible," Ali beamed. "The way the horses behaved and the accuracy of the roping, there definitely isn't anything quite like that back home. The vibe around the arena was electrifying." "Spot any good-looking ones?" Helen probed. "There was this one. It was a stunning bay mare with a white blaze and she had blonde streaks through her mane and tail. She was on the money," Ali described. "No, not horses. Men," Helen said eagerly. "Ha, no, I can't say I even noticed," Ali said. Helen raised her eyebrows, not convinced. Can you come and help me, please?" Ali said. Hugh appeared at the door. "Can you wash your hands and then you are in charge of peeling the potatoes?" "Sure, Mum," as he disappeared back into the motorhome. Bill followed Hugh outside. As Hugh began to peel the potatoes, he carried on telling Bill his story, telling him about the roping dummy and getting it every time with his new rope. Ali zoned out. Helen's questions had stirred something inside of her, and it didn't feel comfortable. The more she thought about it, the angrier she felt inside. Her thoughts began to take hold. "Is coming to the fair not enough? Now I have to start looking for a new man. What if I want to be a widow for the rest of my life? What if I never want to kiss another man again? They only go and leave you alone to live life in sorrow," she thought to herself. Her thoughts began to gather more and more momentum as she started to chop the vegetables more vigorously. A carrot flew across the table. Everyone stopped what they were doing and looked at Ali. "Everything all right?" Bill asked, placing the runaway carrot back in the stew pot. "Yes, of course it is. Why wouldn't it be?" Ali snapped back. With that, she disappeared into the motorhome. Everyone looked at each other, trying to figure out what had just happened. Bill stood up and followed Ali into the motorhome. Ali was trying to light the gas stove but was struggling to find the matches as she opened the cupboard and then slammed the door closed again in frustration. Bill opened the drawer to the side of the cooker and took out the matches. "So, are you going to tell me what's wrong, or am I going to have to figure it out while I'm repairing the hinges on all these cupboard doors?" Ali lit a match and turned on the gas. As the stove came to life, she placed a pan of water on it. "Sorry, I didn't mean to damage your cupboards," she mumbled, avoiding eye contact. She didn't want Bill to see her tears beginning to build. "Don't worry, I made them. It would take more than a slam to break them," Bill said, coming up and wrapping his arms around Ali. "So, are you going to tell me what's wrong?" Ali took a deep breath in. "I just don't know if I'm ready to love again. I don't know if I'll ever be ready to love another man again. Sometimes I feel so strong, and other times I feel like a leaf could knock me over. I just don't want to feel sad anymore. I want to start enjoying life again. But at the same time, I don't want to be pressured into doing anything. Maybe what I have right now is good, and it's going to as good as it's going to get. And I'm okay with that." Ali had to stop as she couldn't get any more words out as the tears flowed. "No one is asking you to fall in love again, get married and live happily ever after. You're stronger than you know and courageous. But there is no point spending the rest of your life using all your energy dodging opportunities of happiness and love just because you're afraid of what it might develop into," Bill continued. "Don't go looking for love, but at the same time, don't go avoiding love either. You deserve a life of happiness and love. At the end of the day, all you'll have when you're 6 feet under is your story. So make sure it's a good one. Not one of regrets, but one of adventure, joy, fun, laughter and love with friends and family. Ali lifted her head off Bill's chest. Since when did you become a wise old sage? Hey you, less of the old. I've still got many miles left on and many hours of tormenting Helen too. They both laughed at the thought of Bill causing mischief and Helen pretending to be mad even though she didn't always end up laughing. Thanks, I needed that, Ali said, taking a step back and wiping away the tears. Hugh appeared at the doorway, holding the chopping board with potatoes. Here you go, Mum. Thanks, Hugh. I'll put those on now. The stew will be ready in 30 minutes. Hugh handed the chopping board over to Ali. Can I go and rope now? Hugh asked shyly. Of course you can. Ali smiled, trying to pretend everything was all right. Wait for me, little man. I'm sure I have an old rope lying around somewhere, Bill said, rummaging in a cupboard. Ali looked at Bill. Don't you go injuring yourself. As if. I'm 25 up here, Bill said, pointing to his head, and that's all that matters. Hugh and Bill headed out of the motorhome and began looking for something to rope. Ali had one last check of the dinner. Everything was on track. She looked at the clock. It wouldn't be long before Sally, John and Aidan arrived. She collected the knives and forks and then headed out to lay the table. As she began to set in the places, Helen got up. I'll open another bottle, she said, placing her hand on Ali's shoulder as she passed. Just as Ali finished setting the last place, she heard mumbles in the darkness. Sally, John and Aidan came into sight. Aidan darted straight past the table to where Bill and Hugh were roping and joined in. Hey, how are you doing? Ali asked, giving Sally a hug. We've come with goodies, Sally said, lifting up 2 bottles of wine. Perfect, Ali said, as she moved across to give John a hug. She took the beers out of John's hands. I'll put these in the fridge. Do you want one now? She asked. Yes, he replied. Make that 2, a voice called behind. Ali turned to see Bill leaving the boys to roping the bale of hay they had found. Bill made his way across to where everyone was standing. Hi, I'm Bill. As he shook Sally and John's hand, he turned to Helen to shake her hand too. Ha! After 30 years of marriage, I think we're past the introductions, she said, as she placed a beer in his hand instead. He leant across and gave her a kiss. I'll just go and check on dinner, Ali said. Do you need a hand? Sally asked. No, I have 2, thanks, Ali said, jokingly waving her hands in the air, as they all laughed and sat down at the table. Ali returned with the pan full of potatoes and put it in the centre of the table, and went back inside to collect the stew. Dinner, you two, Ali called across to Hugh and Aidan, as she placed the stew on the table and took off the lid. The aroma of the stew filled the air. The stew smells good, Mum, Hugh said, sitting down at the table. Let's hope it tastes good too, Ali replied, as she began serving everyone. As she finished putting stew on her plate, she sat down and they lowered their heads to say grace. Tuck in, Hugh announced, filling his mouth with potatoes. Laughter filled the air as the wine flowed and the stew disappeared. Bill had spent the evening teasing Helen, and Helen was trying to avoid the temptation to throw potatoes at the grump. Right, monkey, your turn to wash up, Ali said, leaning back in the chair, as she surveyed all the empty plates around the table, and the empty stew pot. You too, Aidan, Sally said. Hugh began collecting everyone's plate and taking them inside. Aidan followed, carrying the stew pot and potato pan into the motorhome. Bill lifted the bottle of wine up to the light. I'd best get another one of these then, he said, getting up, reaching inside the door and pulling out a full bottle of red wine. He began filling up the empty glasses. Do you come here every year? Helen asked Sally. Sally began to explain that they take their annual holiday here, as it was where she and John first met. I seduced her with a good-looking herd of cows, John said proudly, taking a sip of wine. I just felt so sorry for the poor buggers having to put up with him every day, Sally corrected, winking at him. How long have you been together? Ali asked. 15 years now, I think, Sally said, working her way back through the years. Actually, it's 16 years this autumn, John said, looking at his wife in disbelief that she couldn't remember how many years they had been together. What? Sally shrugged, chuckling at her husband. How did you two meet? Sally said, looking at Bill and Helen. The local dance, Helen began. He was quite good on his feet when he was younger. Hey, I'm still an incredible dancer, don't you know? Bill proclaimed. Age has nothing to do with it, he continued. What about you, Ali? Sally asked. How did you meet Hugh's dad? It is no fairy tale. I had broken down at the side of the road and he'd stopped to help. He towed my car back home for me and then I asked him if he would like a cup of tea. And that was it. He never left, Ali said, looking up at the stars, reminiscing about that fateful day. Do you think you'll ever have another man? Sally asked. Ali took a gulp of wine and carried on looking at the stars. She felt Bill give her hand a squeeze, and instead of saying the first thought that had come into her mind, she took a deep breath and let out a sigh. I'm open to opportunities, Ali replied. What opportunities? A voice asked behind her. Ali froze. She hoped Hugh hadn't heard that. Nothing, monkey. Sally gave Ali a puzzled look. If your mum would have another man, Sally said with Ali glaring at her. Of course she will. Dad's love is transformed. We're just waiting to meet him. But I don't think we will have to wait long, Hugh alleged. Ali's eyes shot across to where Hugh stood, but before she could ask anything more, Hugh and Aidan had quickly picked up their ropes and ran to the bale of hay. What is that monkey dreaming up? Ali wondered, as she recalled that everything Hugh had asked for so far had come true. Ali downed the rest of her glass of wine. Helen leant across and poured her another glass. Sally wasn't letting this one go. She had got the bit between her teeth. So, what would your dream man look like? She asked. Come on, you. That's enough of your matchmaking, John interrupted. Seeing how uncomfortable Ali had become, Sally turned to John. I was only asking, she said innocently, and then turned back to Ali. So... Ali took another gulp of wine. I don't know, to be honest. Alive, I guess. They chuckled at her remark. You must have an idea, said Sally, clearly not satisfied with Ali's dismissive comment. Ali knew Sally wasn't going to let it drop until she felt she had got an answer. What the hell, Ali said, putting her glass on the table and raising her hands to the sky. Tall, dark and handsome. Sally looked at her. This isn't a fairy tale. Come on, just describe your dream man, Sally pleaded. Ali looked back up at the stars and let her mind begin to build a picture of her dream man. Well, I guess he would be kind, caring, good at co-creating. I would get that funny feeling in my stomach. Not nervous butterflies, but butterflies of happiness. He would be accomplished and know what he wanted to achieve in his life. And when we kissed, it would be incredible. And I'd get the feeling we're both one. Ali looked back at everyone sitting around the table. Sally smiled proudly. Everyone was captivated by the picture of the dream man she had described. He has to get past me first, Bill said protectively, as he'd taken Ali and Hugh under his wing. Helen laughed. That won't be hard. Everyone began to laugh, and Bill sat back in his seat, pretending to sulk. He sounds incredible, Sally said, as the laughter began to die off. He will be. I won't settle for anything less. I'll know when I meet him. Ali sat back, satisfied that no one could fulfill her criteria. As they were pouring the last of the wine, Hugh and Aidan returned with their arms aching from roping. None for me, Sally said. We'd best be making tracks. As she looked across at John and Aidan. Yeah, I think you're right, John replied. Everyone got up. Thanks for coming, Ali said, giving them both a hug. Thanks for the ace stew, John said. Come on, you, John said, scooping Aidan under his arm. Night, Hugh called to Aidan. See you tomorrow, Aidan replied before disappearing off into the darkness. Right, you. Time for bed, Ali said, looking at Hugh, who was struggling to keep his eyes open. Hugh sluggishly got off his chair, got his pyjamas out of the truck and went to get changed. Ali waited until he reappeared from inside the motorhome, and then they made their way to the back of the pickup. Ali lowered the back and Hugh climbed into the den they had made with their blankets, cushions and sleeping bags. Night, monkey, Ali said. Night, Mum. Hugh gave her a hug and a kiss and wrapped himself in the sleeping bag. Sweet dreams, little man, Ali said, closing the back of the truck. Ali went to the passenger side of the truck and took out her diary. Closing the door, she made her way back to the table. Bill and Helen were inside washing up the last of the glasses. Ali opened her diary and began to write as she sat under the stars. Dear Diary, well, I survived the first day. We watched some team roping and I got Hugh a rope as he is now aspiring to be a world champion. Next, he'll be wanting a horse. When we were at the roping stall, we met Sally, John and Aidan, and they joined us for dinner with Bill and Helen. It's been a while since I've cooked for others, but I think I pulled it off. There wasn't anything left, which I guess is a good sign. I thought I was going to die when Sally started asking me about my dream man, but you know, they're kind of right. I can't go around avoiding love or happiness just because I feel guilty. Instead of I shouldn't be feeling happy. Hugh's dad would have been proud of his boy today and of us coming on this trip. They're the things I need to be focusing on, and who knows, if wishes come true, my dream man may sweep me off my feet. I'm not holding my breath. He has big shoes to fill, and I'm not just letting anyone into our lives. I still feel Hugh's dad around me, especially when I look at the stars. He's acting as our northern star, guiding us each day. Would he really want to guide me to another man? It's not something we've ever talked about. I guess I thought we didn't have to, that we would be together until we were old. Anyway, the day was good. I enjoyed the dinner tonight, bringing new friendships to life and nourishing our existing friendship with Bill and Helen. Who knows what tomorrow will bring, but like Bill suggested, I'm going to start being open to receiving the new opportunities life provides. I think Hugh is definitely onto something with this magic of life. There have been definitely one too many coincidences happening lately to not think someone is watching over us. Love always, Ali. Ali closed the diary and placed it on the table as the peaceful feeling began to flow up from her feet all the way to her head. She heard Helen and Bill start to set up their bed. She scooped up the diary and poked her head through the door. Night! They both turned round. Night, Bill said. We'll see you in the morning. Ali put her diary in the front of the truck, then made her way round to the back and slowly lowered it, trying not to wake Hugh, and climbed in, pulling it closed behind her. Ali opened the back of the pickup after a restless night's sleep from having a very strange dream. As she climbed out of the back of the pickup, she was greeted by the buzz of the fair. Ali glanced across to the arenas. They were already in full swing. Ali made her way round to the table outside the motorhome. Helen was sitting with a paper doing a crossword. Morning, Sleepy, she said. Did you sleep all right? Ali started to make her way to the motorhome door. Not really. I couldn't get settled. I just kept having a really weird dream. Helen's eyebrows lifted, and with that Ali went to make herself a cup of tea. She returned with a fresh steaming cup of tea and sat down. Where is everyone? She asked. Helen put her paper down. They are at the arenas. I'm not sure what they are watching. Hugh seemed to have it all figured out. Sally, John and Aidan are with them too. They came by the motorhome earlier on. I'm sure Hugh will be keeping an eye on Bill, making sure he doesn't cause too much trouble, Helen said, shaking her head at the thought of what her man was up to. They said they would come back around tea time. Helen finished. What have you got planned for the day? Helen asked Ali. Well, to be honest, not a lot. I think I'm just going to relax here, maybe read a bit. I'm going to take full advantage of the free childcare, Ali chuckled. That sounds like a good plan to me, Helen said, picking up her coffee. Hugh and Aidan were up on top of the arena side to get the best view of the competitions. With Bill peering through the rails, Sally and John had gone for a wander around the shop stalls. Did you see that? Hugh said as a man jumped off his horse onto a cow. Yeah, we don't do it that way on the ranch, Aidan replied. Hugh took out his timetable and looked at what was next. Aidan peered across. Brilliant, team roping, Hugh said excitedly. Do you fancy heading up to the starting gates to get a better view? Aidan asked. Can we do that? Hugh said, a little unsure. Yeah, of course we can, Aidan said, climbing down. Aidan turned to Bill. We're going to head up to the starting stalls, he said. Good idea. I wonder if Steve is still working up there, Bill said, scanning the starting gate. Who's Steve? Hugh asked. He's someone I knew way back when I was working at the ranches, Bill said as he started to walk towards the starting gate. As they made their way through the crowd of people, it quickly turned into a crowd of horses. With some cowboys sitting on the arena fence, Bill led the way. As they reached the gate, Bill spotted Steve. They carried on going around to the other side of the arena. "Steve," Bill shouted to a man who was a similar age to Bill, but slighter, who lifted his head, then smiled when he recognised who had called his name. They took each other's hand and shook them. "How are you doing, mate?" Steve said. "Not bad. And yourself?" Bill asked. "Good. Are they yours?" Steve said, looking down at Hugh and Aidan. "Oh no, just looking after them for the day," Bill said, ushering the boys closer. "Come here, lads. You can sneak through here and get a better view," Steve said, pointing into a small gap in the front of him that looked directly into the starting gate. The boys made their way over and got comfortable. Bill and Steve were busy catching up with what they had been up for the last few years. When the first riders took their positions, the commentator announced the cowboy's name followed by the horse's name, and then they were off as the first cow left the chute. One after the other they went through. The boys didn't say a word as they were mesmerised by it all. Then a horse and a cowboy took the box closest to them. Hugh recognised the horse from the day before. It was the bay mare with the blonde streaks in her mane. The commentator introduced the pair as Ben and his horse Firefly. The guy nodded his head with Tom on Red Rock, and then they were off. They were the quickest by far as Ben roped the head and Tom got the heels of the cow. Bill and Steve had stopped talking to watch. Steve turned to Bill. "That's Ben. He's a good hand. He has a ranch a few hours away. Got some real nice cattle." Bill nodded in acknowledgement. As the next contestants entered, Ben and Tom made their way round to the back of the starting gates to where Steve and Bill were standing. Steve turned to Ben. "That's a damn good time. Are you going for the championships?" "It's worth a try," Ben smiled. Hugh had moved away from where he had been stood with Aidan. He went over to Bill and Steve. He lifted his hand. "Hey, Firefly," he said, rubbing the horse's forehead. The mare lowered her head to Hugh's height. "She'll keep you there all day," Ben said, reaching and rubbing the mare on the neck. "How old is she?" Hugh inquired. "Just coming up 6. She's doing well at the moment," Ben said. "Do you ride?" he said, looking down at Hugh. "A little, but not since my dad died, as my mum stopped spending so much time with the horses and riding. She only went to feed and water them in the end," Hugh said, stepping closer to Firefly's shoulder. He reached up and put his arms around her neck and took a deep breath in. He had missed the smell of horses. "Do you want to go?" Ben said, getting off Firefly. "She's a real gentle mare." Hugh looked at Bill to see if it was okay. Bill smiled. "Your mum doesn't need to know everything we get up to today." "I won't tell her if you don't," he said with a twinkle in his eye. Hugh lifted his leg and his toe just reached the stirrup. Bill came behind and lifted him up. Hugh swung his leg over the other side. Hugh shuffled in the western saddle and looked around him. His smile grew. Ben handed his reins to him. "Left, right, stop, back," he said, moving Hugh's hand in different directions. "You okay?" Ben asked, looking up at Hugh on Firefly. "Okay, this is awesome!" Hugh exclaimed. Everyone laughed as Hugh squeezed his legs together and Firefly began to walk forward. "Just walk around as in a big old circle," Ben began. Hugh sat back, trying to imitate the other cowboys around him. "That's it. Now try stop," Ben instructed. Hugh lifted up the reins and moved them towards his belly button. Firefly slowed down and stopped her feet. Hugh burst into a laugh of pure ecstasy. "Do you know how to rope?" Ben asked. "A little. We were practicing last night," Hugh replied, pointing at Bill and Aidan. "All right then," Ben said, lifting the rope up and passing it over to Hugh. "Hold your reins loose in your left hand with your coils, then spin your loop with your right hand, but be careful not to spank Firefly," Ben said, taking a step back and grabbing a bin that was nearby. "Right, rope the bin," Ben suggested. Hugh squeezed Firefly into walk and circled around, so he was in front of the bin. He built his loop and swung it 3 times and let go. The rope landed on Firefly's ear. She shook it off her head and the loop fell to the ground. Ben smiled, and just as he was about to say something, Hugh shouted, "Oh, bugger! I didn't open my left hand." He recoiled the rope and Ben took a step back. Hugh walked Firefly on and brought her to a stop. He built a loop, 1, 2, 3 swings, and the loop soared through the air. It landed just to the right of the bin. "Now you're getting the hang of it," Ben said, sinking his hands into his pockets. Hugh set off again, and this time the loop flew past the bin. "Right, this is going to be the one," Hugh said with determination. As Firefly was doing her circle, Hugh began to build his loop and then brought her to a stop in front of the bin. He swung the rope and let it go. The rope travelled through the air and landed around the bin. Hugh stood up in his stirrups. "Yahoo! I'm the world champion!" Everyone clapped and cheered. Ben walked towards the bin and lifted off the rope. He walked towards Firefly and Hugh. "Looks like I've got stiff competition to win the championship this year," Ben said, handing over the rope. "Don't worry, I'll let you have this championship," Hugh said cheekily, then laughed. "Right, I had better go and put Firefly away in her stall. She'd worked hard today," Ben said. He leant forward and gave Firefly a big hug. "Thanks, Firefly," he whispered, then slid off the saddle and came round to Firefly's nose to give her a kiss. Hugh turned round to Ben and gave him a hug. "Thanks, Ben, that was out of this world." "Any time," Ben said, reaching down and hugging him back. Ben put his foot in the stirrup and swung back up into the saddle. He steered Firefly to the left, and Tom motioned for his horse to follow. Hugh went over to where Bill was standing, beaming from ear to ear. He didn't know what to say to explain the bucket loads of happiness he was feeling right now. Bill smiled back, knowing what Hugh was trying to say. "Mum, Dad," Aidan called as he saw his parents walk past them. Sally and John spun around to see Hugh, Billy, Aidan and Steve standing there. "Hey guys, how was your afternoon?" Sally asked. They looked at each other. Hugh spoke up first. "It was amazing. I got to rope and ride one of the horses." His hands flung to his mouth. "But you can't tell Mum," he said sheepily. "Don't worry, we won't," John said with a wink. "Come on, Hugh, we're missing the action," Aidan said, making his way back to the arena. Bill said goodbye to Steve and they followed Sally, John, Hugh and Aidan to the arena side, where they spent the rest of the afternoon. Bill, Helen and Hugh sat around the table having dinner. Hugh was just finishing his last mouthful. "Mum, do you want to go to the stage tonight and listen to the live bands?" Ali leant back in her chair. "Yeah, that'll be a good. Do you know who's playing?" "No, but they can't be that bad if they're playing here," Hugh said. Ali smiled. "I guess not. Let me just have a shower and we'll head over. Are you guys coming?" looking at Bill and Helen. "No, I think we're going to hit the bar tonight," Bill said, looking for Helen's approval. She nodded in agreement. I'll use the shower first," Hugh said, picking up his plate and heading into the motorhome. Ali sat back in her chair. She had had such a chilled out day doing nothing, and it felt great. A sharpening the saw day, she thought. I'm sure Hugh has got the rest of the days jam-packed with stuff to do. Then Hugh reappeared, dressed and showered, ready to head off to the stage. "That was quick," Ali remarked. Hugh smiled. "The shower's free, Mum." Ali got the hint. Hugh wanted to head off. Ali grabbed some clean clothes and her wash bag and headed into the bathroom. Bill and Helen collected the rest of the dirty pots and went inside to wash up. Hugh got his travel bag out of the car and took out his diary. Dear Dan the Diary, I've got to tell you about the most incredible thing I did today. I have been wanting to tell someone all day, but I can't tell Mum because she would go mad. We were watching the team roping and Bill knew a guy called Steve near the starting gates and we went to see him and get a close look at the roping. While we were there, we met Ben and Tom, and Ben let me ride his horse called Firefly, and I roped a bin. I was rubbish to start with, but I roped and got it after a few attempts. I love Firefly so much that I think she should be my horse. I miss riding it and the horses. Ben is really nice. I think Mum and him would get on really well. All the things I'm asking for are coming true. I circle a place on the map that I want to go to and then add notes about my dreams coming true. Then I meet the people who help it to come true. This trip is amazing. I think Mum is starting to remember the magic of life too. I have circled Ben's ranch on the map, which is the next place we are going to go to. I wish that me and Mum could spend some time on Ben's ranch. I would like to ride with him and rope cattle, and I wish I was a team roping champion too. Anyway, Mum's ready now. We're going to go listen to the bands playing on the stage. Hugh. Hugh put his diary back in his travel bag and placed it on the back seat of the car. As he shut the door, he saw his mum standing there wearing her cowgirl boots, jeans and a sparkly top and denim jacket. You look great, Mum, Hugh said. Ali looked down at the outfit she had decided to wear. You know what, Monkey? I feel great too. Don't worry, Mum. I'll fight off the cowboys, Hugh joked. Bill stuck his head out of the motorhome door and Wolf whistled. Helen joined him. On the pull, are we? She joked. Ali smiled. Nothing anyone said tonight would bring her out of this good feeling. Come on, Hugh, let's find the music, Ali said, taking hold of Hugh's hand. They made their way through the cars, past the arenas, and then they heard the band in the distance. Hugh moved closer so as not to lose his mum. Ali weaved through the crowds towards a small clearing where they stood to take in the surroundings. They stared up at the stage. The music was blasting out of the speakers. Hugh looked around the crowd for anyone he knew, but didn't spot anyone. He looked up at Ali, watching her sway to the beat of the music. She had always loved to dance. He smiled and wrapped his arms around her waist. It was great to see her so happy again, he thought. Ali reached down and put her arm around Hugh's shoulder. The next song came on, and as the catchy beat grew louder, Ali looked at Hugh. May I have this dance? She said in an old English accent. Of course you may, Hugh replied, bending forwards in a swagging bow. They began to dance, twirl around, twisting, sidestepping and pulling funny faces. They laughed at each other, but it felt so good. They continued through the next two songs, and then Ali made a time-out sign with her hands as she was trying to catch her breath. Ali sat down on the grass. Hugh had another look around the crowd, and his gaze stopped at three men standing a little way back, behind him. He squinted through the darkness and then recognised Ben's face. Mum, I'm just going to say hi to some friends I met today. Okay, I'll wait here, Ali replied as she sat swaying to the music. Hugh ran over to where Ben and Tom were stood. Hi, Ben, he said as he ran up to them, out of breath. Hey, champion, how you doing? Ben asked. I'm good. Who's this? Pointing to the man stood next to Tom. That's Chad, Ben said, taking a sip of his beer. Hugh walked over to where Chad was standing. Hi, I'm Hugh, he said, holding out his hand. Chad, Hugh walked back to Ben and stood in front of him. Ben took his eyes off the stage and looked at Hugh. How is Firefly? He asked, concerned. She's fine, happy eating her hay. She has got a big day tomorrow, Ben replied and looked at Tom and then back at the stage. Are you going to win the championships tomorrow? Hugh asked. Tom stepped in. He has won it for the past 2 years. Another year wouldn't hurt. Ben just smiled at him in response to his comment. How many horses do you have? Hugh asked. Steve told me you have a ranch a few hours away and that you have really nice cattle there. Ben knelt down, giving Hugh his full attention. We've got about 60 horses and 1,500 cattle at the ranch, Ben replied. Is Firefly your favourite horse? Asked Hugh. She is definitely mine, and I know she is going to win the championships tomorrow, Hugh concluded. She's one of my favourites too, and thanks for the heads up. I think she'll do great tomorrow too, Ben said, standing back up. Ben looked at Hugh. It was his turn to ask the questions. Who was that you were dancing with? As he looked across at the woman who had caught his eye and stirred his heart. Oh, that's my mum. We were on an adventure. Hugh began to tell Ben about his vision wall, coming on this trip, meeting Jeanette, Bill and Helen, and then meeting Aidan, Sally and John. Hugh pulled out his map. See, here are the places we have been and people we've met, and here are the dreams that have come true, he said, pointing to a circle with writing in it on the corner of the map. Ben studied the map. Why have you circled the town where my ranch is? Ben inquired. Because that's where we're heading after the fair, Hugh said casually. Does your mum know that? Ben asked. Not yet, but I'll tell her before we set off. She is just remembering how magical life is, and she is starting to be happy again, like she used to be, so I don't want to scare her with all my plans. I'll let her know nearer the time anyway. She said she wanted to take it one day at a time. Maybe we could visit you and Firefly, Hugh said, looking hopeful up at Ben. Well, you're both more than welcome. I have a barbecue back at the ranch every year after the fair. You and your mum are welcome to come. We'll be there, Hugh said, jumping on the spot. Anyway, I better get back to Mum. Hugh put the map away in his pocket and said goodbye to Tom, Chad and Ben, and walked across to where Ali was sitting. He sat down beside her. Are you all right, Monkey? Ali asked. Great, Mum. This is the best trip ever, Hugh said, leaning against her. I second that, Ali said, wrapping her arms around Hugh. That's chapter 5, and I will see you tomorrow for chapter 6, which is The Bar.